Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely unpack the hidden mechanics of human behavior and hand you a clear, actionable blueprint to totally upgrade your decision-making. You know, if you've ever looked back and wondered why you, or maybe the people around you, make choices that just seem wildly illogical in hindsight, well, you're in exactly the right place. Our massive, overarching goal today is just one thing: figuring out how to cultivate true rationality.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a slightly uncomfortable question. Do you really control your decisions? I mean, really think about it. How much of your day-to-day life is actually driven by cool, calm logic, and how much is just hidden, primitive instinct? Like, say, firing off that passive-aggressive Slack message or buying some ridiculously expensive gadget at 2 in the morning. We all love to think we're firmly in the driver's seat, constantly using our intellect. But the reality? It's often the exact opposite.
Just consider this powerful insight for a second. Rationality is the ability to counteract these emotional effects, to think instead of react, to open your mind to what is really happening, as opposed to what you are feeling. This idea completely shatters the illusion that we're in absolute control. It tells us point blank that true rationality, it's not a default setting we're just born with. It's an active, highly cultivated skill.
We're actually drawing these vital lessons straight from Robert Greene's exhaustive guide, The Laws of Human Nature. By looking through the lens of evolutionary psychology, Greene exposes the raw, fundamental drives that really shape us. He makes this incredibly compelling case that our primal hardware hasn't fundamentally changed at all. And honestly, recognizing that fact is the very first step toward true self-mastery.
To master this, we'll be following a quick, structured journey today. Number 1, the illusion of control. Number 2, the inner Athena. Number 3, surviving group madness. And finally, number 4, steps to true rationality.
All right, let's start with part 1, the illusion of control, confronting our emotional drivers.
So, we begin with a universal flaw, which Greene calls the law of irrationality. This is the dangerous yet super common misconception that humans operate primarily on reason and foresight. But the truth? Deep-seated emotions, social pressures, and the simple primal desire for immediate pleasure totally dominate us. When we dwell on anger or our own insecurities, those emotions literally become the lens through which we try to solve our problems. They completely cloud our vision and always result in incredibly short-sighted thinking. But it's actually fascinating how these emotions mutate when things are going well for us. Humans naturally exhibit this wild disconnect from reality right after a string of successes. We develop grandiosity. Suddenly, we think we're the sole, brilliant architect of our achievements, conveniently forgetting any role that luck or timing played. And this overconfidence is dangerous. We underestimate new challenges, we take on tasks way beyond our capacity, and when we eventually do fail, we immediately blame external forces rather than our own myopia. Moving right along to part 2, the inner Athena, a historical blueprint.
To really grasp the immense stakes of this internal battle, it helps to look at the massive divide between impulse and reason throughout history. On one side, you have John Blunt during the South Sea Crisis. This guy was so frantic, so entirely obsessed with immediate success that he completely lost sight of the connection between actions and consequences. His impulsive decisions led to a catastrophic financial collapse. On the flip side, we have the great Athenian leader, Pericles, who embodied a detached, far-sighted strategy. He absolutely refused to let the heat of the moment dictate his moves. He just remained grounded and calm.
Pericles modeled what Greene beautifully calls the inner Athena. When facing a massive, terrifying conflict with Sparta, his peers were panicking. They were demanding an emotional, direct land attack. But Pericles confronted this irrational panic head-on. He chose a calm, highly calculated defensive stance instead. He recognized a land battle would be a total disaster, so he advised the Athenians to consolidate their resources and rely on their superior navy. By refusing to let the Spartans provoke an emotional reaction, his rational governance ultimately fostered tremendous prosperity for Athens.
Let's move to our third point, surviving group madness and the pull of the crowd.
We've talked about our individual emotions, but watch how this builds when we introduce the overwhelming physiological force of a group setting. Groups invoke our primal need to belong. And this isn't just a quirky psychological trait, it's a physiological force. When we're in a group, we naturally exaggerate our agreement just to be accepted, but more dangerously, groups trigger an emotional contagion. If the group feels panic, you feel panic. If the group feels exhilaration, you feel it too, and you often abandon all critical evaluation in the process.
This creates a false hyper-certainty that frequently leads to incredibly risky, irrational choices if we don't actively secure mental space for independent thinking.
Green highlights a pretty sobering reality here. Our differences are mostly an illusion. Imagining differences is part of the madness of groups. He points to historical events like the Cultural Revolution, where group madness thrived on highly simplified black and white views of good and evil. It just goes to show how easily fear and conformity can lead individuals to act entirely against their core values. So the key takeaway? We have to actively lower our permeability to group emotions. That means we have to stop letting the crowd's feelings leak into our own heads, question group norms, and fiercely maintain our individual integrity.
That brings us to Part 4, Steps to True Rationality, your practical toolkit.
Instead of just pointing out the problem, let's equip ourselves with the direct solution for everyday life. It really comes down to executing this three-step process. First, recognize biases. You have to step up and admit that emotional influences often dictate your decisions. Second, beware inflaming factors. You need to play detective and identify the specific triggers causing those reactions. And third, bring out the rational self. This means actively cultivating the self-awareness required to balance those deep emotions with logical thought. To actually put this into practice on a random Tuesday afternoon, you can use these 4 strategies. First, know yourself. This means constantly reflecting on why you really want something. Next, examine emotions. Trace a feeling back to its root. Are you actually mad at your colleague, or are you just super stressed about a deadline? Third, increase reaction time. This is simply about hitting the brakes. And finally, accept people as facts. This one is huge. Stop projecting your own desires onto others. Just accept their complexities without getting frustrated that they aren't behaving exactly as you scripted them in your head.
Let's actually take a strategic pause right here on this specific point, increasing your reaction time. Mastering the space between an event happening and your response to it is the literal foundation of taking back control. Think about it. When a colleague sends a really aggressive email, instead of firing back instantly, you pause. You assess the situation. That single moment of self-reflection is a total game changer. It allows you to recognize your anger as a stress response rather than a rational basis for conflict.
Now, we do need to introduce a little vital nuance here. We've been treating emotions kind of like the enemy of rationality, but critical thinkers like Daniel Kahneman, the author of Thinking Fast and Slow, remind us not to oversimplify this. Not all emotional responses are bad. In fact, our intuition and emotionality serve crucial instinctive roles. They are absolutely essential for empathy, for creativity, and for the social bonding that keeps human relationships intact.
Therefore, finding the balance is everything. The ultimate goal of Green's teachings is absolutely not to suppress your humanity and become some emotionless robot. I mean, that's impossible anyway, right? The real goal is to foster a dynamic, harmonious interplay between the emotional and rational aspects of your decision-making. You want your emotions to inform you, sure, but you want your reason to actually drive the car.
As we conclude this explainer, I really want you to think about the real-world application of everything we've just covered. How would your last major conflict have changed if you had paused to consult your inner Athena? What if you had increased your reaction time, accepted the other person as a fact, and chosen a far-sighted strategy over immediate gratification? Take a second to reflect on that, and ask yourself how adopting this rational blueprint might entirely reshape your future outcomes.